Peace and power, peace and power, peace and power. Back once again. Yafeuh Balogun, the street reporter, um, reporting on where was I December 12th, 2017, when my great comrade, good comrade, and friend Rakem Balogun was ultimately raided and arrested by the FBI in his home. Where was I? Um, December 11th. I just remember it like it was yesterday because December 12th was just so significant uh, to me as it relates to that situation. Um, December 11th, I was at my good friend, good comrade Stu Becker's house, um, and I had actually reached out to Rakim, whom he didn't stay too far from me at that particular time. He was um, probably stayed maybe a couple of miles uh, to the north from where I was at the time. And so I had to give Rakim a call, and I told him, I said, I'm about to come over, kick it with you for a second, talk to you for a second. All this again is December 11th. So I was planning on kicking with it, talking with um, him and Buddha, maybe playing a few video games or whatnot. At that time was kind of playing video games on and off a little bit, at least with Rakim. Um, so that was really my plan. Um, he said, if you don't come by at a certain time, just call me. And so that time, of course, I kind of was being slow about connecting with him. And so that time had come and passed, and I actually given him a telephone call, and he didn't answer. Um, and so, if you know anything about Rakim, as far as his sleeping patterns, usually if he don't answer the phone this late at night, it's going to be very difficult to get him up. And so, just keep in mind that he had lived in this apartment community um, for some time, for an extended period, and had been there and gotten quite comfortable with the community. I'm sure he had great rapport with his neighbors, but it was just a nice neighborhood near the Addison section of Dallas, Texas. And that's more or less kind of the area which he enjoyed. He's not the type of person that kind of likes to live in the hood, so to speak. He likes to live in a more upbeat, more affluent, um, you know, college kid sort of kind of hangout location where you have some economic growth going on, in the area. So he likes that type of yippy environment. So that he chose to live in Addison. So um, again, wasn't too far from me. I was planning on connecting with him. Reached out to him in the middle of the night, maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock. He didn't answer, so I kind of let it be because was planning on coming over, relaxing at least for a moment or two, and seeing how things went. And so that's kind of the relationship that we had at that particular time. Um, went to sleep, got up early, and was sort of making my rounds, making my trips, kind of early in the morning. And it's ironic that we were actually speaking about the FBI raiding, or I should say, speaking about the FBI sort of watching um, us in that at that time, because at that time I had my own incidences, and Eric Yafeuh, he had his own incidences where the FBI was making trips to homes and places of employment, things of this nature at that particular time. And so we kind of jokingly uh, was had been talking about it for some time, and I was riding along. I remember I was on Cat Wisdom Road, about to enter on Interstate 20. Um, no, enter on Interstate 35 going north, about to head back to the north end of town. and got a call from Eric Caffrey, who told me, he said that Rakem had been raided by the FBI and had been arrested. And I thought for a second, I thought that he was joking because we were just talking about this a couple of days before, uh, just mentioning and talking about situations that have occurred historically and had just occurred kind of recently at that time, where there was some uh, police intelligence, the FBI was involved, going to folks' homes and places of business. And I thought he was joking. As it turned out, he was telling the absolute truth. And I was very shocked at that particular point that actually had occurred. It was one thing for him to be detained, but it's another thing for him actually to be arrested, for him to actually being taken and um, dealing with that whole process of going to federal court and hearing the charges and things of that nature. I particularly remember us going into going to his then appointed attorney's office and trying to get some details. And I would say it's probably about 4 to 5 of us. And we took the position that if we needed to, that we was more or less going to try to strong arm our way into getting some answers, not necessarily as though we were going to try to physically uh, make someone give us answers, but by sheer presence, when we showed up at his then appointed attorney's office, we wanted to make sure that we knew that he was someone that was actually cared about, that we were very concerned about, and someone outside of his public defender's office was concerned. And of course, I'm sure not too many times often does that even occur. Uh, when defendants, if you will, are going through that or being prosecuted um, by the U.S. government, does that happen where people come down and make their voice heard and make sure that their projected attorney knows that, hey, these individuals, in addition to his family, actually do care about his well-being. And so we had a situation a day or two after he was arrested where we ultimately went to his attorney's office, his appointed attorney's office, and had kind of a situation. Initially, they were planning on not actually meeting with us, but ended up meeting with me and one other person. I believe it was Eric Caffrey. And basically, they, kind of advised us on kind of what they thought and what their game plan was at that particular time. Very early on in the case, but we wanted to make sure that they knew that we were a solid group of point of contact for him. And so at that time, we began to develop what became the Rakem Balogun Defense Committee, which worked very hard and very diligently to put Rakem's case before the world as much as we could. And of course, it became identified as him being the first arrested for the so-called Black identity extremists. And the only reason that occurred was because we worked very hard to ensure that we reached out to the right people um, from the community, reached out to the right people politically, and reached out to those that were already having this conversation about the Black identity extremists. Couple of people that I do like to mention that obviously played a significant role in that was Kalaka Baruti Shakur, which she is very much so known, and she took the on as the chairmanship, more or less, if you will, of the group of the Rakem Balogun Defense Committee, and also Stephen Benavidez, who was very well connected in networking and making sure that certain conversations could be had. Our struggles at that time was trying to find the right attorney to take his case. And of course, if you know most federal cases, the attorneys tend to be very expensive. And so we took the time out and conversated with a few attorneys. But as it turned out, his public defender uh, attorney that was appointed to his case did an awesome job in defending him and actually got his charges disqualified, if you will, or dismissed. Um, but at the end of the day, again, I thought it was, extremely shocking. I was planning to be there that night, February 12th, 2017. We had a conversation about me being there. I pretty much stayed kind of where I was at, stayed at home where I was at. And like I said, any other time, I would have actually left and went to where he was at because of that. We was relating at that time, and we had some great conversation, and kind of a relaxing place to be. But outside of that, um, at this point in time, our position, of course, is to still defend Rakim, because even at this point now he's in prison. But I wanted to more or less discuss just a little bit about where I was at on December 12th, what my mindset was like. And as I stated, ultimately, we had to kind of deal with that. And dealing with one of your best friends or comrades in prison is a very hard thing to do, because you more ultimately see yourself as being locked up and in prison as well, if you really truthfully care for this person and you want to see the best for them and have their well-being being acknowledged and taken care of, and trying to help apply solutions. And so we stuck with Rakim the entire time. He was in prison ultimately 6 months. And as I stated, the entire 6 months, we were able to successfully create a situation where folks outside of his normal support group basically acknowledged him and his case. Again, he was the first arrested so-called black identity extremist, which was a terminology that was created by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to identify uh, black people within the movement, men and women, who were very socially conscious, that more or less was concerned about the plight of their community, and not just concerned in the sense of just being on social media, but I also had been physically active. And Rakim, of course, was one of those individuals that had been physically active and also in a position of leadership. And so this is very important to talk about. Um, this had just come to my mind. I was thinking, exactly where I was at that particular time. It was very significant for those of us in the movement here in the city of Dallas, being actively engaged on a daily basis at that particular time and trying to lead and direct certain things to happen, especially on the issue of police brutality, which we say is a euphemism for police terrorism, which is a terminology that I coined from Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., might I add, or maybe even Chairman Fred. Um, but that's more or less what occurred. But that's my spiel. I just kind of wanted to discuss that and try to move forward as best we can. Peace.